Daf Yud Beis Samad Beis. We'll begin Yud Beis Samad Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom of the 2 dots. So we learned previously that Beis Shammai says that you are not mevaker chayla on Shabbos, you're not menachem and ovel on Shabbos. Beis Hillel are matirim, they say it's mutter. However, even though Beis Hillel says it's mutter, nevertheless there are shinuim. There's different things on Shabbos than during the chol. We're not mispalel for the chayla on Shabbos like we do during the chol. Ton Rabbanan and Nechnas Levakir is a chayla. If a person comes to Mivaka chayla on Shabbos, he's not mispalel, he doesn't do a regular tefillah, because on Shabbos you're not Mivakir Srachav in that manner because it brings about tsar. So what he does rather is Shabbos is a time when we don't cry out, but nevertheless the refuah is close at hand. The refuah comes on Shabbos. Shabbos has the power to be merachim. Even though we're not mispalel, but Shabbos itself, if you're mechabed Shabbos properly, you treat Shabbos with a proper cover, you're not mitzvah yourself, Shabbos itself will heal. So we want to give encouragement to the chayla, we want to mechazik the chayla, but we don't daven on Shabbos, we don't do a tefillah per se. Rabbi Yehuda, he says the Rebbeinu Shalom should have rachmi on you and other chaylim. Rabbi Yisrael. He says together with chayil Yisrael. As Rashi says that including someone with the rest of Kalal Yisrael, then the tefillahs are answered and are closer at hand. Rasha is bothered by, we just said we're not davening, isn't this a lashon of tefillah? Amakim Yerachem Alechem, Amakim Yerachem Alecha, or Amakim Yerachem Alechem B'Tzayach Chayil Yisrael. He says it's not a lashon of a tefillah, it's a lashon of a haftacha. The Rebbeinu Shalom will surely be merachem on you. Shevna ish Yerushalayim. So Rashi says Shevna was an Adam Choshev. Taisus has a different gear. He says it's not Shevna, it's Shacht. Bikning saw Aimer Shalom when he came in, he said Shalom, but see also when he left, Aimer Shabbos him Elizak or Refuah Kreva Lav. The Rachamam Narubim. Vishabatu Bishalom. And you should keep your Shabbos Bishalom. Kiman Azla Adam Rabbi Chanina Mishiyesh Lachel B'Sech Beiset Sarach She'arvin B'Sech Choli Yisrael. According to whom does it go, though what we say? If a person has a chayla, he should include him with the rest of the chayla. He should have a refuah together with the rest of the chaylim. Kiman Karviyasi, that he should be ma'ar of the chayla with other chaylim. Even though Beis Hillel is matern, as we said, but it's bekaishi because it calls it sar to the one who visits and the one who's menachem. When he came and he wanted to ask, and he asked him about a chayla, Zimnin Amar Amakim Yaftecha L'Shalom. V'Zimnin Amar Achma Yad Kirana L'Shalom. So, sometimes he said V'Lashon HaKadosh, a Lashon of Yipak L'Chol L'Shalom, and sometimes he said V'Lashon HaRamiz, he said Yad Kirenach L'Shalom, which is the same meaning. He should remember you, but at one point he said V'Lashon HaKadosh, one point he said V'Lashon HaRamiz. So, for the Gemara, how could he do that? How can he use Lashon of Aramiz? You should not ask for things. You should not be shol tzrachav. Mispab Lashon Arami. V'Omer Rabbi Yochanan kol shol tzrachav Lashon Arami in Malachi Yesharas Niskakim loy. The Malachim don't pay attention to it. Shein Malachi Yesharas matkin b'Lashon Arami, because the Malachim don't understand Lashon Arami. Taisus said that's with the exception of Gavriel HaMalach, because we find that Gavriel HaMalach in the Masechet Sotah taught Yosef Shivim Lashon. He was an exception, but generally the Malachim don't understand. That Taisus is bothered. How could they not understand? They understand. They know even what the person is thinking, let alone to understand what he's saying. But perhaps they don't understand, or they don't pay attention to Lashon Aramiz. That some learn that Lashon Aramiz is beneath the dignity. It's a lashon shibush. It's beneath their dignity. Al kolpanim, they're not miyachis to lashon Aramiz, and any kind of being melitz Yesher for the person, if it's in Lashon Aramis, then he will not have that benefit. The Gemara answers, Shiny Chod, the Shechina Imai. A Chayla does not need that because the Shechina is with the Chayla. The Shechina is present, the Shechina is there. And so, of course, the Shechina knows exactly what is being said. How do you know that the Rabbi Hashem, the Shechina, is Soid, he sustains, he supports the Chayla? So he supports it. He supports him on a sick bed. He should not sit on a bed or a chair, meaning he should not be higher than the head of the Chayla. He wraps himself up in his talus and he sits before him because the Shechina is above the head of the Chayla. So Tosfos mentions when it says Lo Yeshev al Gabe Mitav Lo Gabe Safsal, it means that where the Chayla is lying down on a low bed, so he should not sit on a chair or a stool which is higher than the head of the Chayla. But if the Chayla is on a high bed, on a hospital bed's high bed, for him to sit on a lower chair, that would be permissible. How do we know that the Rebbeinu Shalom sustains and he nourishes the Chayla? So coming back to the halacha that we mentioned in Mishnah, a person should not read to the light of the candle because he might tilt it. And they might bring the oil closer to the flame. He might increase the flame, which is considered as lighting the fire, as increasing the flame, increasing the fire. That's less of our ways. Even if the fire, the candle, is very high, it's 2 stories up, or 2 lengths of the goat stick, it's very high, he's not going to be able to reach it. He's not going to be able to tilt it. Nevertheless, it's still awesome that he is still not allowed to do it. So the way Rashi learned it, some other Rishonim learned as well. Now, even though we're really not concerned he's going to tilt it, it's way up high, but it's a light plug. It's a light plug. We make a light plug over here. The Balamor says, no, it's not an issue of a light plug. It's that we're concerned. He might climb a ladder, he might climb the stairs, he might climb a ladder, and he might tilt it. Now, this is going to be relevant in the discussion coming up shortly, whether we make a light plug in this case or not. The way Rashi and most Rishonim learn is, the pshat in this Gemara is it's a light plug, and therefore, even though there's no direct concern in this particular case, but we say light plug. Since we make exer for other cases where it is relevant, we make it across the board without exception. It's also in this case as well. So to keep this in mind, because it will be negea for halacha coming up shortly. So the Gemara says, if one person on his own should not read to the light of the candle because he might forget himself and he might tilt the candle over the malach. But if they're 2, then it's permissible because the 2, one will remind the other one, so they won't come to tilt. It's not 1 and not even 2. It depends if they're reading in the same inyan or different inyanim. If they're both reading in the same inyan, so they're both aware of what the other one is doing, they're doing it, so to speak, together, more like, for example, like chavrusa. So one is aware of what the other is doing. If one comes to tilt, if one comes to be mata, the other one will restrain him. But if they're doing it 2 separate inyanim, each one is not that aware of what his friend is doing. So his friend could be tilting and he won't know about it or won't pay attention to it. He's not that involved or aware of what his friend is doing. So there we say, in that case where it's 2 inyanim, even if they're 2, then it's also. He says if it's Medur, if it's a bonfire, if it's a large fire, even if there are 10 people, it's also, because since it's so large and the flame is close to each one and each one separate from the other one, they're sitting distances apart, then each one is not really familiar with what his friend is doing. So even if you have 10 people, but each one is almost independent, so to speak. So he might forget himself and tilt, and his friend will not be aware of that in order to restrain him. So by Madura, by a big fire, a bonfire, even 10 is also. However, if he's an Adam Chashuv, if he's a prominent person who normally doesn't tilt the candles, the neirais, then it's mutter, because he's not accustomed to doing it, so it's mutter. Now here the question comes up, the question is asked, we learned before that according to Rashi and some other Rishonim, that if it's 2 stories high, or it's very high, then even though we're not concerned, then he might come to tilt it, because he can't reach it. Nevertheless, it's also because of light plug. Now, don't we see from there that even though that in this particular case we're not concerned, but since we do make this gzera, we make gzera shemiyata, so even though in this particular case we're not concerned he's going to be yata because it's 2 stories high, but we make a light plug. So therefore, even though you're saying that by an Adam Chashiv, essentially we're not concerned, because he normally during the week doesn't tilt. Normally, even during the week, it's beneath his dignity to get dirty, get his hands dirty with the oil and tilt the can. He doesn't do that. And here we say on Shabbos, therefore it's mutter. Why don't we say light plug? Bishlam, according to the Balamor that we mentioned before, where the case where it's 2 stories high, it's also not because of light plug, but it's also because he might climb up, take a ladder and climb up and tilt. Then we don't have the kasha. We don't see this inyan of light plug by Shemiyata. But according to the other Rishonim that we say by Shemiyata, this gzera of Shemiyata, we say light plug. Why don't we say light plug by an Adam Chashav? That even though it's not relevant to him, even though he during the week would not be mata, but since there's a gzera of Shemiyata, why don't we say light plug? And the Taz answers that we don't say light plug from a case where the chum aser to a case where they don't. Meaning, if you have a candle, if you have a nair with a wick and oil, the chum aser that case. That's also Shemiyata. Now, even if it's in a circumstance where we're not really so concerned, but it is a candle, it is a nair. If it would be on the 1st story, it would be geyser. It's on the 2nd story, similarly, light plug, we're geyser. But that doesn't mean that we would be geyser in a case from one case to another case. If we're geyser, the etzem gzeira is on a person who would be mate. We're geyser on a person who during the week might tilt. We're geyser on Shabbos that he can't read l'oil in there, even in the circumstance where he might not come to tilt. It's too high. But that doesn't mean because of light plug, we extend the gzeira to a person, to a different person, where we were never geyser on him to begin with. And an Adam Chashiv was never included in the gzeira. So therefore, in that case, we don't say light plug. You can't read Laura Ner Shemiyata, that's the gzeira. Amar Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, Ani Ekrav Loyata. He said, "I'll come. I'm not gonna be mata. I'll be careful. I'm not gonna get carried away. I can read Laura Ner on Shabbos, and I'm not gonna be mata. I won't get carried away." Pamachas Kara Ubigish Lahatas. There was a time he was reading Laura Ner on Shabbos, and he was about to be mata. Amar Kama Gedolim Divnei Chacham Shel Yomi Lo Yikra Laura Ner. He said, "How great are the words of Chamim! I see the greatness of the Gzera." They say you should not read Laura. He said, "Myself, I was so sure that I wasn't going to be mata, and I almost came to be mata." Rav Nosson Omer, not only Bikesh, Rav Nosson Omer Kara Vehita. He actually did. Because of Alpin Kosa, Ani Yishmael ben Elisha, Karis V'Hitesi, in every Shabbos. He says, I did this aver. The Kishibona Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash will rebuild, Avi Chata Shmeina. I'll bring a korban chatas, a fat animal, a choshev animal, korban chatas. So you see, even though it was an Adam Choshev, he was mata or was going to be mata, and you're telling me about an Adam Choshev shiny we're not Goizer and Adam Choshev. And you see, we're talking about a very Adam Choshev, Vishmal ben Elisha, and Bikesh Lahatlis. Or answers Amar Avamishanu Vishmal ben Elisha. No, he's not your typical Adam Choshev. A typical Adam Choshev will not come to be Mata, but he, Hoyel, Mishua, Mesi Matzmal Divrei Torah Kehedjet, he's Mesi Matzmal Kehedjet. So he gets so involved in his learning, and he gets so orangutan and preoccupied in his learning, and the course of his learning, he is like a hedget. He is Mesi Matzmal Kehedjet al Divrei Torah, and therefore, if he was so learned with such a slavas, if he couldn't see properly, he would be mata. So therefore, he's not in that category of an Adam Choshev. But a regular Adam Choshev, we will not be Goizer the Gzeira. Shem asked, how could it be that he actually was over Avera? Ashta behemten shel tzadikim. Kodesh Baruch Hu no loy maybe takol al yodam tzadikim asmali kol shekain. Places in several places says that's only the gabe inyon da'achila, which is a meguna b'yoser. But from time to time, it could be that an avera inadvertently is done. Tanachana shamas by the cases of cars learn there. So we learned in one brisa that the shamas, he could examine the cases of cars learn there. He could check to see if they're clean. He could examine it. But lo yivdak, and another brisa says lo yivdak, he can't. Lo kasha kam b'shamash kavua kam b'shamash ina kavua. The difference if it's the regular shamas. So the way Rashi learns, other Rishonim learn Farkeret, but the way Rashi learns the Shamas Kavua, he's a professional, he's more particular. So if the Shamas Kavua, he cannot, because he might inspect it so closely, he might become Tamata. He might tilt it. Shamas Shena Kavua is not that particular, then he doesn't have such a responsibility, we're not concerned he's going to be Mata. The Gemara says, Haval b'Shamas Kavua, but it's a difference whether oil or neft. If it's oil, then the general gzera of shemiyat applies. A person might tilt it, but neft has a bad odor, it has a bad smell. A person is not likely to tilt it because it has a bad odor, and he'll stay away from it. So the gzera was never mentioned by neft. The whole gzera was only mentioned by oil, but not by neft. So it's just a question of what type of light, what type of fuel are we talking about. Here again, you see this concept of the Taz, that just because we're geyser by mishcha, a loy plug doesn't mean we'll extend it to another item, to neft. That will extend it to an item where the gzera doesn't apply. If it applies, in a case where the gzera is by mishcha, so it applies, even if it's 2 stories high. The gzera applies by mishcha. Then we extend it into a case, even where in a particular case we're not so concerned, it's 2 stories high, but it doesn't mean extending it to a different item or a different person. It doesn't mean to extend it to an Adam Choshev or to neft. The question is asked, Meforshim asks, why over here, if Shamash Sheina Kavua, he's not so particular, he is allowed to check and see if it's clean or not. We learned before they didn't buy clothing, which does not require such inspection. It doesn't require such close inspection. It still would be also here that you have to check it closely to see is it clean or not. It requires greater examination, even though it's a Shamash Sheina Kavua. Why are we not concerned? And the answer, because of the great tzorech for cleanliness, for hygiene. We want to make sure that the kalim are clean, so we are more makel in this type of a case. If it's a shamash she'ena kavua, where we say he is less likely to tilt. But oil, the fuel is oil, which we say a person is more likely to be mata to tilt. Mahu. Are we guys or not? On one hand, there's a reason not to be guys, shamash she'ena kavua. On the other hand, it's mishcha. There's a more reason to be geyser. What's the din? Al marav halacha vein marim ken. Halacha is that it's mutter, but you don't publicize it. Rav Yirmei barava amar halacha marim ken. He says that it is halacha, and you could be meir over there. You could say it, publicize it. We're not afraid. Shema yizalzim. Rav Yirmei barava iklu be'ravasi kam shema v'kabarak lohur d'shaga, and the shamas was examining it. He says, his wife said that you don't hold this way. Amrlu Shavke Kirabe Sfile, leave him. He follows his Rebbe. He follows his Rebbe Rabbi Yirmiyah, who says Allahu Moim Kain, so he's going after the Shita of his Rebbe, and that for him is permitted.